This is the worst loss of American diplomatic life in the history of the country.
He was assassinated by individuals who, at the time, were seen as very right-wing radicals, adherents of whom are now in the cabinet in Israel.
That war is still going on.
The possibility of a future for Palestinians, which looks bleaker today than it ever did.
The notion that they can somehow be bombed into submission is fanciful.
There is certainly capability, but they don't have stable governments.
My greatest fear, frankly, right now is that Iran will overplay its hand.
The Middle East is between chapters. The war with Iran is paused, not closed. Gaza is under a fragile ceasefire. Lebanon is holding under another. And the United States has just published a new counterterrorism strategy that has received both support and criticism. To help us read where this is heading, we are joined by two of the most experienced American diplomats in Western Asia or the Middle East. I'm Joe Kawly, the Washington Bureau Chief. With us, we have Ambassador Ryan Crocker, who served as U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Kuwait, Syria, Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and Ambassador Susan Ziadeh, former U.S. Ambassador to Qatar, with senior posting across the Gulf and the Levant. Welcome to both of you. Ambassadors, it's an honor. Thank you for granting us the time to jump into it. The Middle East is between chapters. The war with Iran is paused, not closed. Gaza ceasefire is very fragile. Lebanon also is under another. And the United States just published a new counterterrorism strategy that received both criticism and support. So we would like to delve into this to see where we can go behind the headlines with the situation. But before we go into policy, I want to ask you both one question. What is the one moment when you look back at your postings in the Middle East? What is one story, one moment that you still think about when you read what is happening today? We'll start with you, Ambassador Crocker.
Well, for me, it is 1:05 in the afternoon, April 18th, 1983. That's when the embassy in Beirut blew up, and I was in it. This is the worst loss of American diplomatic life in the history of the country. And it forever changed the way diplomacy is conducted by the United States. And it was, again, as we look at the current conflict with Iran, it was, you could argue, the first attack in what has been a very long war between the United States and Iran. Dawn is behind that attack. And now we fast forward these 43 years to 2026, that war is still going on. So that was the day, the hour, the minute that changed everything.
What about you, Ambassador Ziadeh?
It was the Marine Ball. I'm trying to remember exactly the year. It was either 95 or 96. Forgive me, I should know. I was in Jerusalem, and it was the night that Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. And we were at the ball, and all of a sudden the CG or the DCM came to announce that we should all go home. And Rabin, of course, had been instrumental in movements for peace, Oslo Accords, also moving towards trying to come up with a better situation vis-a-vis the Palestinians and a modus vivendi with Israel. And he was assassinated by individuals who, at the time, were seen as very right-wing radicals, adherents of whom are now in the cabinet in Israel. So it goes to show you how far to the right the cabinet and the government, some figures in the government have moved in Israel, and even in some cases the population as a whole, and their sentiments to the issue of what Israel should be, where its borders should be, and the possibility of a future for Palestinians, which looks bleaker today than it ever did.
Ambassador Crocker, the president signed a new counterterrorism strategy a few days ago. It puts drug cartels above Al-Qaeda as the top threat. And it names also left-wing extremists domestically in the same category as ISIS. You have spent more time inside the actual counterterrorism file than almost any American diplomat alive. Is that sequencing serious or is it political?
Well, I would have to say that the drug cartels have kept a very great distance historically from what we term pure terrorist organizations. The drug cartels are a business, an evil business, but business.
Mm-hmm.
And they have historically not wanted to associate themselves with those who are in the terrorist game for ideological reasons. So frankly, I question the intellectual validity of this step. Clearly, the trafficking in narcotics internationally is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for the United States. And I think efforts at interdiction need to be stepped up. But I'm not sure this is the way to go about it. I think it confuses the issue and it has political overtones. Begin to there is a very fine line between opposing political views and threats to American security. And I worry that that line is getting blurred now in an intensely polarized environment where legitimate political criticism is now being criminalized. And that frightens me a great deal.
Ambassador Ziadeh, also you've spent your career working with many Gulf states and partnerships with counterterrorism with those Gulf countries. When they read such a strategy and they see domestic left wings alongside actual threats that they hurt and fight, what does that make you think, and what does it mean to that partnership with the Gulf countries when it comes to counterterrorism?
They focus on what it means in terms of their own country and cooperation on a global level, but particularly with the United States in terms of tracking individuals, in terms of strengthening their counterterrorism capabilities. You know, it's a matter of the security within their own country, security within their region. They do look at it from a number of perspectives, for example, financial, counterterrorism in finance and the movement of funds. That's been a big focus in the Gulf, and which they have worked cooperatively with us as we've taught them how to track better and how to strengthen their banking systems to make sure that that doesn't take place in their countries. But they're really focused on what happens in their country and how they define it, and then how they cooperate with the United States to deal with their issues in their own context.
Ambassador, to talk about Iran, because this is the biggest story, it's been for weeks now. The Iran and the United States have been in direct negotiations, also through third parties. President Trump rejected the proposal that Iran came back with. And from your own experience, when you opened the U.S. Embassy in Damascus with difficult, threatening environments, what does these talks negotiated with third parties and intermediaries would tell us about this particular case? Is this something that could hold in the future?
Well, this is not really a negotiation. This is just messages being passed primarily through the Pakistanis. But it's not even what we would call proximity talks, such as we conducted with the Iranians in Oman, with the Omani shuttling between the two delegations. This is simply the passing of messages. It's not even close to a negotiation.
What is it doing for the entire situation? Is it moving forward? Is it getting us closer somewhere, or it's just buying us time?
Well, if it's buying time, it's not buying very much of it. The ceasefire holds kind of, sort of. Clearly, the United States, President Trump is not interested in a return to outright hostilities, but he still holds that card. And with the Iranian leadership, it's hard to say. But I cannot see this current process leading to any kind of stable change in the situation, even as a preliminary to negotiations. To me, the proposition on the table is a basic one, a simple one, at least in concept. It's trading Iranian control of the Straits for lifting of the American blockade on the Iranian coastline. That we in essence, agreed to go back to the status quo ante February 28th, and then sit down at the table for what will be a long, arduous set of negotiations. And I think this is what Secretary Rubio was saying several days ago, that we need to agree on a framework for negotiations before we actually have negotiations. What will be the issues to be discussed?
So basically, on the ground, we and the war, we want right now to go back to the situation before February 28th, which means opening the Strait of Hormuz that was not closed, and then sit and talk. Is that the situation where we're in right now?
That is the best outcome I can see.
Mhm.
That free and unrestricted navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, as is the case on February 27th, in return for a lifting of the American blockade. Hardly a victory for either side, but it is the only way I can see for getting a semi-secure situation in the Gulf that would permit negotiations to resume.
Inside the Gulf capitals right now, what is the larger concern, you think, Ambassador Ziadeh? Is that Iran retains the capacity to retaliate, or that the broader U.S.-Iran picture remains unsettled?
Well, for now, the fact that they retain the capacity to retaliate, yes. But even before that, the opening of the Straits of Hormuz, they have to get their energy exports out, and it's really hurting their economies. Uh, so far, they've been able to manage it, but eventually, they're not going to be able to. Yes, they would like to have on the table the issue of the ballistic missiles and the proxies. Those are the two more important issues for them, frankly, rather than the nuclear file per se. But our administration so far has focused on the nuclear issue, whether it's the highly enriched uranium or what ability there is that we would allow or not allow Iran to enrich uranium. But for the Gulf, they want to be able to get the straits open, free passage without tolls, and to have the kind of security that allows their economies to grow and also to diversify in the direction they were away from energy products.
Ambassador Crocker, in Gaza, there is right now a technocratic body, the Board of Peace. To put it in a way familiar to you, you ran the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq. How is this close? What is the difference? What are the lessons that may or may not have carried over?
I don't see many parallels between the American experience in Iraq in 2003, the time of the Coalition Provisional Authority, and the current situation in Gaza. Hamas still exists. It is still armed. We're at effective stalemate there. There is the Board of Peace, but it does not rule in any way or administer or manage or really have anything to do with the situation on the ground in Gaza. And frankly, I don't see much of a way forward. I think we're at a stalemate in Gaza, a precarious one, and one in which the suffering of the people of Gaza is just horrendous. They're still very restricted in the assistance they receive. There is no coherent effort at rebuilding, reconstruction. Hamas is still there, and the Israeli threat remains. So it is a pretty awful humanitarian situation and a very unstable.
You said that there's no parallels. From the Gulf side, Qatar is funding the reconstruction of Gaza, but also maintaining contact with Hamas. Lebanon's ceasefire is holding with significant U.S. diplomatic involvement. We're going to see more meetings between ambassadors of the two countries, Israel and Lebanon. From the Gulf seat you occupied, are these governments operating in coordination with Washington or alongside it on parallel tracks to serve their own security and own narratives?
With regards to Gaza, this is they're asking. A lot of it is being done in parallel and not in a coordinated fashion. For example, the UAE is still giving assistance into Gaza. So is Qatar. The question of the office of Hamas in Qatar is unclear whether some of the members of that office have now left Qatar, where it had been more previously established. The Qataris are trying to mediate so that they continue that role. They have relations with members of the Hamas leadership, but still it's a very unclear situation. And frankly, a lot of the attention has been drawn away from that just in terms of the day-to-day issues that have been precipitated as a result of the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran and then the counterattacks on the Gulf countries. So that has taken the priority, unfortunately, at the moment. And so while Gaza has not receded in the background in their minds, their ability to even operate and to assist, other than through humanitarian assistance, which those countries and others, the Kuwaitis and the Saudis, are doing, is in question. I might note also in terms of the Board of Peace, these countries had, several of them had indicated that they would pay the $1 billion membership and be members of the Board of Peace, and that seems to have come to a standstill. So that doesn't seem to be moving anywhere either.
Speaking of self-interest of any country, this week, President Trump is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Mr. Xi has significant influence over Iran. Beijing has purchased Iran oil many times after we witnessed sanctions being waived. China has mediated between Tehran and Riyadh and Saudi Arabia. And when the President Trump's going to meet with Xi Jinping, what does Washington bring to that table that Beijing does not already have? And what are Gulf capitals quietly hoping that would come out from that conversation?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question in terms of what we bring to it vis-a-vis China. We have our own agenda vis-a-vis China, whether it's trade, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's the Indo-Pacific. And then, of course, yes, the Iran war
Yes.
will be on the top of the agenda, which, of course, President Trump was hoping would not be the case. And while it's true they get a lot of oil from Iran actually before sanctions, I mean, while there were still sanctions before the sanctions were lifted, and that is still the case, the Gulf countries are hoping that any interlocutor at this point can play a role to inject a sense of realism in terms of the situation. And my guess is they're hoping that the Chinese can do that vis-a-vis Trump, because they have tried in many ways to voice reason to the president in terms of what is the dynamics on the ground. And you even see in their dealings, and each country is different, of course. The UAE is very different than Saudi, different than Qatar and Kuwait, how they are engaging in a quiet way with Iran, because at the end of the day, geography triumphs, and they understand this is the neighborhood. And so they're trying to figure out how to create this modus vivendi and cool the temperatures a bit. And I think that if they think that China could play a role vis-a-vis Trump, that why not try that? I could see that happening.
Ambassador Crocker, as we said, we were hoping that a ceasefire or a deal would be reached and Trump would take that to the Chinese. What do you think this meeting would come out with, since China has influence over Taiwan? What do you think would come out of these conversations?
Well, with respect to the Iran conflict, I would hope that China will use its influence with Iran to help make that deal, that exchange I was talking about, become a reality. Iran relinquishes control of the strait in return for a lifting of the American blockade. I have no idea what the deliberations are in the White House right now. I think that is a deal, though, that Trump would be inclined to accept. The Iranians may feel that they are in a position of advantage and may be disinclined to make that kind of arrangement. I think China and many other countries, as Ambassador Ziadeh said, the Gulf states, who are going to be Iran neighbors forever, badly want the strait opened. So does Europe. I think if we try to orchestrate a collective international effort to pressure Iran to relinquish its effort to control the strait, that might make that kind of a deal possible. But that is, I think that's the maximum that we can hope for at this point.
But do you think China and Xi Jinping specifically would work closely with Trump to solve this for the interest of the region and the people of the region, or in the interest of holding more power and weakening the position of the United States in the region?
Well, that is something I guess we'll discover when the leaders meet. But again, China has a strong interest in seeing the Straits of Hormuz reopened.
And you think President Trump is aware of that and holding this as a card to play with Xi Jinping at the table?
Well, the White House has urged China to use its influence with Iran to reopen the strait. They've already done that. That's pretty clear that that will be on the agenda. But again, no one has a great deal of leverage here. Not China, not the United States, not Iran. It's a question of, will we settle for something less than a full-blown agreement with Iran, which is not in the cards, quite frankly. And this current leadership in Iran, these guys are all veterans, not just of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, but of the Iran-Iraq War, in which Iran lost 500,000 people. So the notion that they can somehow be bombed into submission is fanciful. My greatest fear, frankly, right now is that Iran will overplay it.
Let's close this conversation with a question to both of you. You both served many ambassadorships in the region, and you know how policy, sometimes it's a series of decisions and policy toward the benefits and interests of the people. Sometimes it's just policy to change the region. Right now, the Middle East is being redrawn. What is one thing that, if you were today in the decision making and policy making, would do in terms of policy that would benefit the people of that region?
Stability. I mean, the whole issue is that there's a lot of talent in the region. There is certainly capability, but they don't have stable governments in many places or stable environments that allow them to prosper. We see this in the Gulf now with what's going on, but if you look at places like Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, even Egypt, to have that kind of political, economic cohesiveness and stability to allow the talent to be able to prosper, and then be able to create those economic linkages, which can happen in the region, I think is a very important component that we need to focus on a lot.
Ambassador Crocker, is those decisions are a coherent strategy or just a sequence of decisions that are not in the interest of the people of the Middle East?
Well, the people of the Middle East ultimately have to determine their own future. That's pretty clear. And the Middle East collectively has suffered from poor governance for decades. That is not something that can be fixed from outside, but I think Ambassador Ziadeh is exactly right. Nothing good can happen, will happen, without some return to a basic security and stability for the region. That is why any effort needs to be focused now on creating the conditions for a stable, long-term ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities that allows economic trade to resume, that will allow the damages of war to be repaired, and hopefully create a dynamic in which a better future is built for the peoples of the region. The one thing about war is that when you're in one, you realize how awful it can be. And if we can find a way, working with our friends and allies in the region and beyond, to stabilize this situation, maybe what we have all been through will impel us to create a better future for the region and for the international community.
Ambassador Crocker, Ambassador Ziadeh, thank you for sitting down with us. And definitely this conversation is about how this Middle East is between chapters. And definitely we're going to be watching. Thank you, and hopefully to see you soon again. That was the conversation about the Middle East between chapters. And of course, the U.S. China summit is going to tell us a lot about what's going to come next or what may happen next. And definitely we will keep watching. This was The Diplomat. I'm Joe Kawly. Until next time.